I think getting right into it, Matt, can you kind of give me your just brief initial thoughts really quick on this draft? Is it a good draft class? Like what positions you kind of value more than others? Let me just hear your quick thoughts really quick.
So I feel like this is a really interesting draft class because I think if you look at it from a maybe you look back on like some quarterback classes recently, some wide receiver classes recently, this draft class kind of sucks in comparison. Like it's
Mhm.
the wide receivers are this is one of the worst wide receiver classes we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah.
A lot of slot guys, a lot of guys that aren't going to probably play outside. At quarterback, you basically have two guys that are going to get drafted early. And you have two guys that are big question marks, and then you have some mid to late round guys. But it's not top heavy.
Mhm.
However, it's extremely deep. And the stuff that's going to get brought up a lot with this draft class is there's a lot of good value to be had for positions that casual fans and a lot of people just don't really care about, like interior defensive line, interior offensive line. In the mid rounds in this draft class, it's been preached over and over. If you are taking interior offensive line and interior defensive line, you can bolster those units up immensely. So, you guys see the Niners stuff. As a Niners fan who have three third round picks and all the like 10 picks, and none of them are in the first two rounds, it's actually a great year to have those mid to late round picks because there's going to be so many really solid players that are starters that are going to be taken either starters right away or starters in a year or two. They're going to be taken in like the third, fifth, fourth, sixth, even seventh round. Like, so I think this is an exciting class. I don't think it's super, super heavy in terms of star potential, but I think the overall depth, when we look back, we're gonna be like, wow, there was a lot of starters in this class. Maybe not a, Jamar Chase or, a Joe Burrow type draft class or, the one recently where you have Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields that look insane out of that class. So not like that, but I think this is one where if you're a good team, you can get a lot better by just kind of band-aiding a bunch of positions in this class. So I think it's interesting in that regard.
Yeah, I think two things that you mentioned. First of all, you being a Niners fan, I do want to say you're probably one of only two or three Niners fans that I like. And I'm sure that you know I've told you this before, but for my audience, my girlfriend and my best friend's dads are both Niners fans. So I'm so sick of Niners fans. I get them everywhere. I can't get away from them. Number one, number two, I really like the point that you made about this draft being not very sexy. I guess you could say. Like there's not a Jamar Chase, there's not a Jalen Waddle, so have you. But there's a lot of really good quality players at positions that, again, fans mostly don't care about. So for a team that I think, like you said, a good team, they can make themselves better. But I think even a bad team with a lot of holes, like the Bears, who everyone's going to be talking about with the first overall pick. I mean, the Bears desperately need interior offensive line. Sam Mustipher is the worst fucking player I've ever seen in my life. Like he is. Have you ever watched Sam Mustipher film, Matt?
I haven't like watched like cut-ups of him. I've seen him get beat a couple times, but like just in normal
If you're
games.
ever like in a really terrible mood, like really feeling bad about yourself, go throw on some Sam Mustafa film, bro. Like it'll he's the worst player I've ever seen. So the Bears, I mean, they have a lot of holes at defensive line, offensive line. Um, so a team like them, a team like the Texans, even a team like the Lions, who I think still have holes on the team, can really fill them in this draft. So I really like that. But I think I want to kind of talk about. I just said that this draft isn't as sexy, but I now want to talk about the sexiest position, which is quarterback. Um, Give me really quick. We'll dive deeper into it in a second. Give me your top five quarterbacks for this draft because McConnell gave me his. Kind of surprised me with him. If you guys want to watch, check out the episode from 2 episodes ago. McConnell gave me his top five quarterback rankings. Kind of surprised me a little bit. I see where he was going, but do you kind of want to give me your top five for this draft?
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't scheme dependent, so it's hard because like it totally depends on what team is
Yeah,
playing. That's
position
what
coaching. Yeah.
fit. Yeah, but if I did do like a raw five, like just like okay, in a nutshell, I would go Stroud at one, Bryce at two,
Yep.
large gap, and then I
Yep.
would go Hendon Hooker, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. Um, and honestly, Will Levis is borderline. I don't think Will Levis is very good.
Not me
I
either.
have Stroud over Bryce, but like I brought up the scheme stuff. If I'm the Texans, I would rather have Bryce Young than CJ
Okay.
Stroud. If I'm
Okay.
the Colts, I would rather have CJ Stroud than Bryce Young. So it just kind of depends on who you're looking at from a scheme point there. I think Bryce Young is a much safer pick in terms of his play style. However, he is tiny. Like he has serious injury concerns. And you start looking around the league at a lot of smaller quarterbacks, they do get hurt a lot. There is a reason for that. However, you don't hit his quarterbacks as much anymore. So it's a little bit questionable of like what his career is going to look like from a health standpoint. But as the player, great player, safest pick in terms of the actual player on the field. And then CJ Stroud, I think what you're potentially getting with CJ Stroud is a guy that has an absolute hose and can hit every single throw on the football field, which you do not see very often. I think there's some things to be desired. He gets the ball out late a lot, but if he develops, he has the potential to be a top 3, top 5 quarterback, which is you don't get that much. Where for Bryce Young, I think he's more of like going to be that tier 2 guy, which is still great. But if you're going to go for the home run, I think you go for CJ Stroud, and that's why I like him there. Hendon Hooker at 3, that's going to be like a huge surprise for people. Obviously, he's not going to get taken over Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, even probably like Jaron Hall or some of these other guys. Like he's probably not going to because he's coming off the ACL. But I think he's a super underappreciated player. He is tough as shit. Like he sits in the pocket and gets absolutely drilled, which that kind of hurt him in the long run. But he also reads the field really well. He understands a lot of their like combination routes they run on the outside, and he has a good arm. He has a really good arm. It doesn't really get talked about him enough, and he's a good quarterback. He really understands the position. He's big. Like a lot of the praise for Will Levis is like, oh, he's so big and fast. It's like, well, Hendon Hooker extends plays at a higher level. He extends plays at a higher level for one, right? And he's like he just sees the field better. So it's really interesting to me when you see that, and it's like, oh, Will Levis is this and this, but Hendon Hooker is the same measurables, and he's just slower, but he extends plays better. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a quarterback that can extend plays and doesn't have as good a straight line speed. So I like Hendon Hooker a lot. That's probably the guy I'm like most high on over the median. Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is really interesting. I actually like Anthony Richardson, so I have him at 4, and I feel like people look at that and they're like, "Oh, you're sleeping on him." No, I actually like him, but I think we have to be realistic. He is a ton of bust potential. He is so raw. His footwork and mechanics are some of the worst you will see in a first-round quarterback.
He completed 53% of his passes in college. I mean, that's not good.
But even when I watch him, like I don't think I don't think he's gonna be like that bad in terms of completion percentage at the NFL level, because like you can fix so many little things, changing his footwork, changing all the false steps he makes, changing the ways he throws the football, changing where he's pushing the ball. Like there was the sequence I remember when I was watching his tape where he threw 10 or 11 straight incompletions, and I'm watching and I'm like, dude, 5 or 6 of these are good thrown balls. Like this is on the coaching staff. This is on the wide receivers there. Like, and it was rough because like you see those numbers like 53%. I didn't feel like he was a 53% complete like thrower. But I don't know. I think it's just like he's a real project. He should not start as a rookie. Like, and people are talking about him going top 10. Like that is crazy to me. But if you're talking about him late in round 1, yeah, dude, take a swing because most likely like probably like 80-90% chance he is going to bust. But if he doesn't, you will have a superstar. So that's why I really like him. And then Will Levis, I told you I don't really like Will Levis. I don't
really like Will Levis either. I don't understand the hype behind Will Levis. Here's what I'll say. I think that it was very interesting. You and McConnell both had CJ Stroud as QB1, which I feel like I don't necessarily disagree with, but I feel like that's not a popular opinion in this draft, so to speak. Bryce at 2, I feel like is fairly, it's pretty good right there. And then you have the gap, which I think I really agree with the 2 quarterbacks at the top gap. Hendon Hooker has been getting a lot of he's been very underrated. And I understand the age concerns. I understand, coming off the ACL, but dude, he was rock solid last year at Tennessee. He was going to win the Heisman Trophy probably if he didn't tear his ACL. So I love Hendon Hooker. I think the age is a bit concerning, but again, quarterbacks can play till they're 40 anyway. So if you have a guy who's going to be really solid for 10 years, I feel like that's more than okay. You want to talk about Anthony Richardson, obviously big boomer bust. I totally agree. We were talking about me and McConnell. We were talking about situations going to matter immensely. Like head coach is going to be the most important thing for Anthony Richardson wherever he gets drafted. If he goes to the Colts, which I think is the Panthers, which I think are a very likely scenario. I like Frank Reich. I think that he can coach him up and he can get a lot of, like you said, those footwork elements, the accuracy issues, all of that can be ironed out. For Bryce Young, we were talking most important thing for Bryce Young would be a good offensive line, because I'm going to ask you right now, can you tell me a starting receiver from Alabama last year?
I mean, everyone was hurt and it was like a transition year.
Right.
So no, it's not like it's not what they've rocked with.
But my point is that Bryce Young made those guys better, right? So we were talking about, hey, if you can get Bryce Young an offensive line, you're rock solid. So I think not that he's going to slide this late. I really don't think so. But I think the perfect spot for Bryce Young would be like Detroit. Detroit's offensive line is fantastic. The receivers are pretty good, but their offensive line is fantastic. Bryce Young would be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL if he had the Lions. So I would just say that. But loved your analysis on the quarterbacks.